What are we gonna do when we get back?
What are we gonna do when we get back?
I take a shower and hit the rack.
Take a shower and hit the rack.
Welcome to Charlie Mike. If you're a combat veteran with an entrepreneurial bug and want to know what highly successful combat veteranpreneurs are doing to transform their sacrifice and experience to create their visual reality, then this is dedicated to your inspiring and fulfilling future. And now your host, Dwayne Paro.
No way, gotta run, feet, lots of fun.
Invest in Yourself ebook is my free gift to you for listening to the show and becoming part of the CO Nation. To receive your free gift, please go to landmarklifecoaching.com. Thank you for joining us on this episode. There are so many veterans with the core strengths to become successful entrepreneurs and continue to make a huge positive impact on our country. Here we highlight the amazing successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Combat veterans, for the purpose of this show, are soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who have served the United States in wars, campaigns, and in theater on foreign soil or hostile waters. Our guest today is Ken Robbins. Ken is the co-founder and CEO of MILLIE. He is a former Army officer with 20 years of experience serving in tactical, operational, and strategic level assignments. While in the Army, he deployed to numerous theaters, including service in Iraq in 2008 to 2009. His final assignments included battalion command in Europe and as a special assistant to the Chief of Staff of the Army. In 2009, Ken was appointed as one of 15 White House Fellows by President Obama. He served as a special assistant to the Director of the Office of Personnel Management and worked closely with career civil servants and political appointees at OPM in the drafting of Executive Order 13518, Employment of Veterans in the Federal Government, which established the Veterans Employment Initiative. After his White House fellowship, Ken served as an Army Fellow at the Department of State. His educational background includes a BS in American Politics from the United States Military Academy and a Master's in Public Administration from the Harvard Kennedy School. Ken and his wife Heidi, who is a top-performing real estate agent in Northern Virginia, have lived in 12 homes during 20 years of Army moves. They purchased their first home in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1998 and their current home in Arlington, Virginia in 2015. They have two daughters. One is a freshman at the University of Alabama and one who is an 8th grader in Arlington Public Schools. All right, well, Ken, welcome to the show and thank you for being a guest.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Dwayne. I'm excited to be on the show. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you tell our listeners all about your journey from a combat veteran to a successful entrepreneur. But before we get into the entrepreneurial experience, can you give our audience an overview of your military experience?
Yeah, so I had a very kind of diverse and not a typical kind of military career, at least for an officer. So, I was commissioned from West Point, as you mentioned in the when reading my bio, and I started off in tactical assignments as a young officer, leading platoons, and then eventually a company out in Colorado Springs at Fort Carson. And then I had kind of the opportunity after my company command time and serving in Bosnia and the Balkans to go to grad school for 2 years and then teach for a few years at West Point. So I got to kind of do see tactical side of the Army early in my career, and then I kind of went to the institutional side in terms of education and how we institute and train and prepare, especially our officers, to be leaders, and did that for a few years. Then back to the tactical side, where I was an S3 and an XO and an infantry battalion, and then eventually having the opportunity to command a striker battalion in Europe is one of my last assignments. But then I also, as you mentioned, I got to do these interesting kind of strategic level assignments where I worked as a White House Fellow and then an Army Fellow at the State Department. So really got to understand how kind of the government and decision-making interfaces with the military at different levels. And of course, I got to see that a lot when I worked for General Odierno when he was Chief of Staff of the Army. So I like to tell everybody, I kind of bounced from tactical to strategic assignments back and forth. But I think I got a pretty good appreciation for how kind of the Army works and how the military works and how the military interfaces with our government. And of course, I'm I'm proud of the 15 months I did in Iraq, and all the soldiers I served with there was probably one of the highlights of my career. And unfortunately, as with a lot of us, a few guys did not make it back from that assignment. So I think pretty heavily about those experiences, and that kind of encapsulates my military career in kind of a nutshell, which is very unorthodox and not kind of very straightforward.
Yeah, very, very interesting career. In fact, the fact that you got the ability to work in those different capacities is very instrumental when you become an entrepreneur, because you're going to do everything from A to Z, and you were able to see how something as large as the Army functions from about every perspective. So I got to believe that was really important in leveraging for your entrepreneurial experience.
Yeah, it was tremendously important. Of course, we don't think of the military and government in general as being very entrepreneurial in nature, right? I mean, that's not how kind of we designed our government, and that's not how we think of our government. But the lessons I learned during those assignments, and especially in my time in the military, I mean, they're directly translatable into what I do as an entrepreneur. And I think, probably the biggest one is understanding, risk, both, at that tactical level where I saw risk on kind of a day-to-day basis, but then at the operational and strategic level, understanding kind of what strategic risk looks like. And, I think probably understanding and managing risk is one of the probably most important and yet most challenging things for entrepreneurs, because, you can be paralyzed by it, and you've got to understand it, and you can't allow it to kind of stop the forward progression or the forward momentum of what you're trying to build with your company. And so, having that opportunity to see that at those different levels, I think it has really helped me kind of understand, I think, and be better prepared to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I agree. The whole concept of risk tolerance is a huge part of being an entrepreneur, as you know, and it can make or break somebody depending on what they're doing, because if they're not risk tolerant enough in certain industries, they just won't survive. But two, if you don't know how to manage that sort of risk tolerance of what's too much and what's just enough, you can also kind of overstep the bounds and end up hurting yourself that way too.
No, I think you're exactly right, Dwayne. I mean, it really, it can be very difficult because you're faced with obviously tough decisions every day. And, sometimes the worst thing you can do is make no decision or take no action. But like you were just saying, you got to be careful about going too far as well, and understanding kind of what's going on around you. And so, and also I think that the risk kind of comes hand in hand with also being able to operate with imperfect information. I think that's another key skill, is you're never going to have all the answers to the problems you're facing. And we all know that if you wait too long, it's too late. So you've got to take the information you have, and you got to make the best decision you can at the time. And, it might work out, it might not work out. You got to kind of keep moving forward and making decisions, and kind of keep the company moving. You can't just kind of sit back and hope everything goes well, because that's usually not a good recipe for success.
Yeah, that's a great example, because you don't always, as an entrepreneur, know necessarily what's next. We all create our business plans, and we all have the greatest intentions, but then reality happens, and you got to figure out, with what information you have, what moves are you going to make, and how does that affect your future vision for your company, or even even near term tactical actions that you had planned to make. Maybe you don't end up in an area that you thought you would, or you don't end up being able to just execute something at the time you thought. So being able to balance, right, that those changing times is very important. I got to believe that commanding various types of battalions as well in different countries, right? Some was in Europe. That in itself, being at the top and seeing all the moving parts and having command of those is absolutely a lever that you can use as you're building your business, to say, well, I've seen this in other ways before, and I know what I did there, so I can leverage some of those things that I did now.
Yeah, I mean, those skills have come in especially handy. I think back on my time in battalion command, especially, there was two things that I kind of always stressed when I was in all levels of leadership, but especially in battalion command. One thing was, my responsibility as the leader of the organization was to give the organization the vision and know where you wanted the organization to go. And what's interesting is in some cases, you're the only person that can do that. Now, that's not to say you come up with this vision and the direction on your own. You do it with a lot of input from your team team and from your folks. But at the end of the day, you're the only person that can really do that for the organization. And I think that's true when you're an entrepreneur too, and you're starting your own company. You've got to have that vision, and you've got to be the one that can articulate that, especially as you start adding employees, because nobody else in the company can do that. Nobody else can sit back and say, well, this is the direction we're going to take the company, because it requires a decision at the end. So I learned that, I think, at an early age, and I really tried to hone in on that and really understand what my role was when I was a commander later in my career. And then the other thing is I always used to talk to my team about was, understanding the importance of systems too, which any successful organization has got to have good systems in place to do routine things routinely, right? And so, and it's not a system if you can't do it over and over and over again, right? So if you can kind of, everybody can kind of push through one time and work really hard and get it done and cross the finish line and be like, we did it. But can you get up the next day and do it again to the same level? And if you can't do that over and over again, then you haven't established the right systems within the organization. And I think at least my experience has been in the last few years talking and seeing other entrepreneurs is some of them struggle with that. And it becomes all about the founder and his vision and what he or she wants to do. They don't give that good vision, and then they don't put the systems in place for their team to kind of follow. And then, basic things aren't being done that need to be done on a daily basis or a weekly or monthly or quarterly basis. And then you see the business start to kind of fall apart as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine who has a media company, and he was doing just that, right? He had a solid vision, and he was putting systems and processes in place, and he thought everything seemed really good. And so then he took a week's vacation, and that was the ultimate test, right?
Right. Yep. No, if you can't walk away from the organization and my whole thing is not only should the organization continue to run, it might even run a little better when you're not around, because you're not tinkering with it as much, and they're not kind of as focused on you and making sure you're getting what you need. I hear that a lot where like folks will say, I went on vacation, I came back and things were running better than when I left. And it's like, maybe you should have stayed on vacation for an extra week and let them just continue to run things, right? So
that's great that's a great pat on the back for that person that's running it, because they can actually say, okay, I have evidence that I have put the right systems and processes in place, because I've almost worked myself out of a job other than I'm the visionary person for the organization.
Yeah, no, and then you get to focus on the fun stuff, which is being the positive leader of the organization and really encouraging and your employees to thrive and to do well, and seeing them grow in their positions. And then that's when it becomes kind of fun, because it becomes less about the grind and more about just kind of turning your folks loose and letting them express their creativity and just seeing where they're going to run with things. And that's like my funnest thing every day is I will throw things out to the team and I'll let them kind of run with it, having no really clear idea where they're going to go. And it always never ceases to amaze me, the creative and talented ideas they come up with or the direction they'll go. Whereas if I try to do it myself, it probably wouldn't have been that creative and that interesting. And so that's when it becomes fun, is you get to kind of create that environment and then really encourage that environment to thrive around the entire organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I've seen that in different levels of leadership. We all come up through doing the tactical, the hands-on aspect of our industry. And then we get into management and then, into leadership roles. And each level, we have to learn that somebody else does know how to do this. And somebody else probably has a newer way and a better way than what we were doing. And we just have to step back and trust that we have the right people to complete that mission.
Yeah, that's always the danger, right? You always want to do the last thing you did in an organization because you know how to do it well, right? So it's always scary to do the new thing you're supposed to be doing. I know I drove my field grade officers crazy when I was battalion commander, because I'd been both an S3 and XO for 15 months in combat. So I knew exactly how to do those two jobs. And it took me a month into my job as battalion commander to figure out that it wasn't my job to do those jobs anymore. I could already do those jobs. I had to let them grow and help them learn how to do those. But I had other things that I had to do. And so focusing on those things that only you can do become pretty critical, because we all wanted to fall back to what we kind of know, what we're good at, right? So
yeah, get into that old comfort zone so that we can feel good about what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get into Ken's experience of when he transitioned out of the military and what that was like, and what path he took, whether it was straight into entrepreneurship or if he went and got one of the standard JOBs, or what that looked like. So we'll be right back. Landmark Life Coaching's vision is to be the nation's premier coaching partner for inspiring and empowering those in transition. They partner with courageous groundbreakers and transitioning veterans to create fulfilling and empowering futures that they desire. They have partnered with various entrepreneurs and transitioning veterans to leverage their core strengths and implement the framework for the future they always dreamed of. Could you or anyone you know benefit from a success partner to bring clarity to your future or their future? If so, please check out landmarklifecoaching.com for more information and charliemikepodcast.com for the Charlie Mike Podcast, showcasing the successes of combat veteranpreneurs. Okay, we are back with Ken Robbins talking about his military and entrepreneurial experience. And just before we went to break, Ken was giving us some amazing insight into the core strengths and abilities that he learned in the military that have been very instrumental to his entrepreneurial endeavors. So Ken, as you were getting to the end of your 20-year career, when you were getting ready to transition out, did you go straight into entrepreneurship, or did you go and look for like a standard job and then realize you wanted to become an entrepreneur?
That's kind of the route I took. So I did my transition very quickly. I made a decision in April that I was going to retire, and by September, I was on terminal leave. So I kind of did I'm of the mindset that the Band-Aid rip is best done quickly and not over time. Look, this not to say that taking a year and kind of really thinking about it, and that worked for some folks, but for me, that wasn't the right answer. And so I did not intend to be an entrepreneur. I kind of started off by doing the traditional job searches, and I had 2 or 3 pretty good offers, and I was excited about doing them. But then, I'd always kind of had this itch, and I'd had a lot of other friends that had become entrepreneurs, and one of my eventual co-founders, Craig Cummings, had helped start several other companies, and he was always kind of talking to me and eventually my other co-founder Jason Dempsey about starting a company together and how we really wanted to do this. And in the end, as I kind of looked around at the jobs and I thought about what I'd done in the last 20 years in the Army, I said, if I don't do this right now, if I don't become an entrepreneur and do what this idea now, I'll probably never do this. It will only get harder as I get older and as I get more comfortable and I do this. This is the perfect time. I'm already in a transition. Things are already going to be different, very different from what I'm used to. If I'm going to do this, this is the time to do it, because I can always kind of go back to those other things later. And so I kind of came to the realization probably by September or October, with about 2 months left of terminal leave. This is really the path I wanted to go down. And then I put myself in the situation where we actually went ahead and did it. So
yeah, that's an interesting path. Just the short time frame and all, and then the thought processes that you went through. Now, for others that may not have their degrees already done and may not be in a financial situation to do that, obviously they should be taking more planning time and looking farther down. But you obviously led a life where you were maybe not consciously but subconsciously preparing yourself for that next stage. And so knowing your style, like you said, of just rip the Band-Aid off and go, that in some ways you probably had yourself relatively well positioned to make that kind of transition and to make it successful. And of course, having the co-founders and somebody else that shared that similar vision, sure was key in being able to, in that position, to make that type of transition as well.
Yeah, it made it a lot easier. And your point about it's different for everybody, and I think that's a great point. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of great organizations out there. So if you're, what I tell folks now is I'm going to go see a guy next week and talk about transitioning. He's getting ready to start the process. And I tell them, things like there's organizations out there like Patriot Boot Camp, which does a really good job of helping you think through transitioning and becoming an entrepreneur. The Hiring Heroes program now has a fellowship thing they do, a corporate fellowship. Doing as many of those programs as you can, I think are helpful to, because being an entrepreneur is not for everybody, and I don't recommend it for everyone because of, there's uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty. certainty. And if you are kind of accustomed to that, twice a month, regular paycheck, kind of how things work coming out of the military, there's a lot of organizations that have great value in what you've done. And if that's what you kind of want to do, you should absolutely do that. So understanding your own risk tolerance is important, because this, like you said, it's not for everybody, and it's something you got to think through. And I think for me, had I not had the support structure, and especially Craig, who he brought the team of what I needed around me together, that I could have spent 3 or 4 months trying to figure that out myself, but I didn't have to do that. I could really concentrate on the idea and kind of jump right into the idea. And not worry about the logistics of how do you actually start a business and doing those kind of things. Had I not had that, I don't know if I would have done this either. So I think that's an important point.
Yeah, I think building any form of network, right, is critical to building a business, because you can never do it alone, no matter what. You could be the smartest guy with the most money, but you don't know everything, and a lot of times you obviously don't know what you don't know. And when you get into these things, being able to surround yourself like you did in a very strategic way with the right people that you can partner with is critical. Because another pitfall that I see some entrepreneurs get into is they'll meet somebody and they have similar desires, they find something in common, and then they go ahead and jump into these partnerships on a new business, and next thing they know, they're really not that similar in how they operate, and they're really not that similar in really what their true visions were, and so they start to diverge, and the business doesn't grow, and then eventually that just has to be stopped, because it's just detrimental to each of the individuals that jumped into it.
Yep.
But partnerships are amazing. If you can find that right person and you guys gel and really complement each other, and that's what this sounds like, is you had that opportunity for somebody who really complemented what you were doing and really helped to make it a success.
Yeah, that I think was the key, and having, and I can't imagine doing it alone. I think having a team of co-founders, look, we had the advantage of the three of us, Jason, Craig, and myself have known each other since we were cadets at West Point. So we've known each other for 20 plus years. So the one thing we had going was we have a built-in kind of trust relationship that's difficult to replicate. And so we're very honest with one another. We're very straightforward. We can say what is on our mind. But more importantly, I never had the nagging kind of feeling in the back of my head that, that one of my partners is going to do something or try to do something unethical. And that I think helps tremendously. And I don't think I would have done it if I didn't have that kind of group of folks that I could work on it together with, because I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, that's really the recipe for that partnership. All those components that you mentioned are important to look for when if you are actively looking for a partner. That's absolutely what you want, so that, like you said, you don't have to second guess anybody's motives or what's gonna happen. You guys obviously came from a very tight knit group anyway, coming out of the academy together. That alone is, you're cut from the same cloth per se, and so that's awesome. What are some tools or resources that you use that you find are very important to being an entrepreneur?
Are you talking in terms of like the business side?
Yeah.
So so for one is having, I think the biggest thing is helping find the right folks, which is what Craig helped us do. We use, just from a tool standpoint, our team is very distributed. So myself and Jason are here in DC. We've got 2 other team members here in DC. I've got 2 down at Fort Bragg. I've got 1 in Florida. I had one that was she's now down in Tampa, and then I have one over in Germany. So we use Slack as our primary communication tool, and we have found that to be very effective. In fact, what I did early on is, once we got onto Slack, and I don't know how many of your listeners are familiar with it, but it's basically a messaging tool. It's a startup itself, allows you to send kind of create channels and talk to your team. What we did is I drove all internal communications onto Slack. So we don't text, we don't email, everything is done on Slack. And so we have a great repository of all of our conversations, all the documents, everything we've ever shared with one another is all captured and saved in this tool. And more importantly, by putting it in this tool, I've set the conditions where, because we're on different time zones and everything, there's no expectation that you've got to answer a message in Slack like immediately. Like the purpose of it is to allow you to get your information in there and then allow the other team member to respond when they're working at their hours. And so I found that tool to probably be the biggest help in terms of keeping our team together. And then we do weekly meetings, and I force everybody to get up on the video screen, even though they don't want it necessarily. But I think it's important for everybody to see each other and see their faces, so that we can stay connected as a team and don't kind of drift too far apart. And so doing that once or twice a week has been pretty effective at keeping kind of the cohesion and the also the fun that we have, because we have a lot of fun together, and we joke around a lot, and it I think helps create and maintain those relationships a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Those sounds like a couple really good tools, especially the communication tool for dispersed organizations, because more and more organizations are dispersed across the country, and having a ability to have a single source that everybody uses, because I know even in a corporate environment everybody tends to have tools that they gravitate towards, and so if you're not on that platform or it's not your preference, then communication channels do tend to break down.
Exactly.
As well as the video aspect, that is also key for a geographically distributed organization. No matter what size you are, if you're 2 people or you're 500 people, getting on video is important. In fact, during my the company I work for, during the day, we do weekly team meetings, and we definitely do video, because it keeps people focused, it keeps them engaged, and as well as it gives you that more personable feel than just listening to somebody drone on over a phone. And so those are some really good tools. So what are some of your next major milestones for your entrepreneurial efforts?
So we're in the middle right now of kind of rolling out our product. So, so we launched the company, we started about 3 years ago, and then we kind of did a metamorphosis about 6 months in, and spent some time with a branding and company and a marketing company that really helped us kind of rethink what we wanted to be and where we wanted to go. And so we launched what has now become the MILLIE site. Really, we kind of finished the content build last fall. And so now the focus is really on, we've got to raise a little bit more money, and we're kind of going to market with our product now this year, and try to build kind of brand awareness around it, which is kind of the focus for the next 6 to 12 months. We feel like we've test drove it enough. We've gotten great feedback, and now we're going to try to get the word out on the brand and on the site to as many folks as we can, and really let them take advantage of it, and see where we go from there.
Yeah, brand awareness is a really critical thing to do, no matter if you're a product or service organization. People need to know who you are. They need to know what you're about. They need to know what your service or product is what problems that's gonna solve, and it helps build that trust, right? They get to know you, and then they begin to trust you, and then they start to like your product or service, and then they become your referral service. Right?
Yeah, yeah, you've got to think about, this is another tip I'd give folks is, I don't have a marketing background. That's not what I did. And so I don't think I fully appreciated how important name and logo was until we sat down with our company 1000 Watt that helped us come up with the MILLIE name and the MILLIE logo. And we spent probably 3 or 4 months working on that. But what we've done is we've created a brand that we can now assign our own meaning to, and it's kind of limitless in terms of the directions we can take it, and it's not just about one particular area. We can go in different directions and focus on different things. Whereas I think too often folks quickly name their business kind of with the first thing that pops in their head, and then the name itself can become very limiting in terms of what it can be, because now all of a sudden you want to go into branch into a different area, and the name doesn't really work for that. And so I mean, I'll tell you, the branding and the naming is a really critical point, because it also helps you look internally to say what do we want this company to be about? What do we want this brand to be about? And then ensuring that brand kind of communicates your values as a company. I mean, we fully embrace our brand because it encapsulates who we are as a company, and all of our values are encapsulated within it. And that's how our business is run. It's run off our value systems that we've created, which is, I think it really helps when we're bringing new folks on too, to make them understand what we're all about.
Yeah, definitely. That you've got some amazing information there. Branding is extremely important, and as you said, you need to make sure your company values are all throughout the branding and being in. And then, like you said, when you bring people on, it's a great way to onboard people. You get them ingrained in those values and what the company is all about right from day one.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Ken. I really appreciate you being a guest on the show. And as we're running out of time here, I'd like to give you an opportunity to let our listeners know how they can get in contact with you or learn more about your business.
Yeah, so the easiest way is they can go to our website. It's GoMillie, GoMillie.com. And just briefly for the listeners out there, so every year 500,000 or so military families move around the world, either transition out of the service or get moved PCS somewhere. And so we've spent the last year basically building a site that will basically help you with all the things you need to do as it relates to PCSing. So we've got neighborhood reviews, we've got information about schools, kind of all the key stuff you need to know when picking a neighborhood around the installation that you're going to be stationed at. And then we've got a couple unique services. So we've got a whole team of veteran and military spouse real estate agents. So these are folks that have walked in your shoes and understand what you're going through. And then we've got our MILLIE scouts, who are military spouses you can kind of hire for in kind of on an hourly basis as needed to kind of help you with PCSing things. And so all of that's all encompassed on the site. And if anybody wants to reach out to me personally, it's ken@gomillie.com. We love to get feedback. I always love anybody out there thinking about entrepreneurship or interested in it. Happy to chat with you because it's a big decision, and so happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on the show, and most importantly, thank you for your service to our country.
Well, thank you, Dwayne. I really appreciate the opportunity and the chance to chat with everybody. So I really appreciate the time.
Remember, loyal listeners, we are the home of the free because of the brave.
Thank you for tuning in to Charlie Mike Podcast with Dwayne Paro. Our objective is to bring successful veteranpreneurs to help inspire and provide insight into what helped them become successful, with the hopes you can take away various strategies you can implement in your entrepreneurial journey. Visit us on iTunes, leave us a rating and review, and let us know what you thought of the show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Hoorah!